Trump is not getting enough credit here for building an ideologically diverse cabinet. When you got everybody from Russ Vought, who's very conservative, all the way over to the pick for labor secretary as a supporter of the PRO Act, and somehow Randy Weingarten is happy about it. I mean, what he has done is, which makes me squeamish, to be candid. And so what he has done, though, is put together an ideologically diverse group of people to sit in a room and help run the government. And that's kind of how he won. His coalition was kind of ideologically diverse that elected him.
They thought they were CNN, and CNN was huge. CNN is the news. CNN is a gigantic corporation. It's a big building, a whole deal, giant sign. They didn't understand that this podcast is 10 times larger than them. And it was exposed during that whole thing, where they just made this terrible chess move. They just ran out in the middle with their king. That's how I found myself in the middle of all this. That's how I found myself having conversations with Peter McCullough and Robert Malone and a lot of other people. A lot of very intelligent people that weren't crazy. They weren't tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists or QAnon believers. They were just intelligent people that had looked at all the data and had said, I think we're being lied to.
He found ways to walk into where those people were. Yes, he was a proud, ultra leftist, and then he became a proud person on the right, largely because he saw shifting towards the right, and that's where his money and his audience could come from. He shifted because more of his listeners shifted, and that's where he drove it to. That's nothing more than consumerism. And
which of his beliefs changed in the past 10 years?
The cope within the left is reaching new highs. And I think it would help if CNN actually had guests who had an idea as to what they were talking about. We have here Amisha Cross, a Democratic strategist who isn't very fond of Joe Rogan. She claims that Joe Rogan shifted his beliefs based on his audience, suggesting that Joe Rogan's pandering so as to keep them on his show. Now, I don't believe that Ms. Cross has ever been on the podcast, but somebody else on this panel has. Coleman Hughes asked a very important question at the end here. When did Joe Rogan ever change his beliefs? And to put it simply, Cross got bodied as Hughes gave her the truth. Watch.
Bernie Sanders had no problem going on Joe Rogan years ago when Joe Rogan endorsed him. I've been on Rogan's show 3 times. I've probably heard over 100 hours of it in the past decade. A decade ago, Joe Rogan was a Bernie Sanders supporter who would get emotional talking about how important it is to legalize marijuana, who would get emotional talking about how important it is to get Christianity out of politics, in particular on the abortion issue, who had a host of left-wing opinions, including about healthcare, and liberals drove him away by calling him a racist, unearthing jokes he made, calling him a misogynist, really with no evidence.
When you make racist
calling him
jokes
a transphobe,
about people of color,
calling him a
people
lot of
calling you
comedians
racist is likely going to happen.
all the time. Calling him transphobic because he didn't like seeing Fallon Fox
He also didn't love the vaccine thing, right?
Beating up,
to our point earlier.
That also used to be a left-wing opinion, to be against vaccines like 20 years ago. Again, so he actually hasn't shapeshifted very much, to your point. The Democratic Party has shapeshifted and driven him away and alienated his followers.
For Democratic strategists, she sure doesn't listen well. And this is why Democrats are failing. I mean, just look at how things have changed within just the last decade. Donald Trump used to be a Democrat. They pushed him away. Elon Musk, Joe Rogan, Tulsi Gabbard, even RFK Jr. were all a part of the same boat. Some of them lifelong Democrats, but the party has changed. They always want to pin the blame on anyone else but themselves. And Amisha Cross is a great example as to why Democrats are turning away from their own party. They're driven by anger and hate, and anybody who opposes them is basically the enemy and they're considered evil. Now, Hughes, on the other hand, makes a very good point. Rogan supported Bernie Sanders, a former presidential hopeful who shares the same mentality with Trump when it comes to creating a populist movement.
Who are you going to vote for in the primary?
I think I'll probably vote for Bernie. Him as a human being, when I was hanging out with him, and I believe in him. I like him. I like him a lot. What Bernie stands for is a guy who, well, look, you could dig up dirt on every single human being that's ever existed if you catch them in their worst moment and you magnify those moments and you cut out everything else and you only display those worst moments. That said, you can't find very many with Bernie. He's been insanely consistent his entire life. He's basically been saying the same thing, been for the same thing his whole life. And that, in and of itself, is a very powerful structure to operate from.
To keep the focus on the working class while the corrupt elites are shoved aside, pushing for economic policies that help everyday Americans. So it makes sense as to why Joe Rogan would endorse Trump over Kamala. Because Kamala Harris was just so full of herself that she wanted Joe Rogan's podcast to go to her. She also promised an opportunity economy with no actual plans as to how to pull it off. And you gotta love this idea of people gathering and talking about a person who isn't even in the room. Because I'm betting that if CNN called, Joe Rogan would actually show up. But that's not what they want. They want to challenge Joe Rogan's credibility with their audience. The problem is that some of their own viewers probably listen to Joe's podcast as well. So this kind of mentality is definitely driving their own viewers away, and it's causing their ratings to further plummet. The idea of freedom of speech, a good economy, and a government that actually works for the people, that isn't the priority of the left. At least not anymore. And so this is why they hate President-elect Trump. It's also why they're trying to tear down what Joe Rogan has built up. Because Joe Rogan has a massive following of people that actually think for themselves. The monopoly of mainstream liberal media is gone. They can't control the narrative so long as we have the freedom of speech, which explains why they hate guys like Elon Musk.
The reason I acquired Twitter is because it is important to the future of civilization to have a common digital town square where a wide range of beliefs can be debated in a healthy manner without resorting to violence. There is currently great danger that social media will splinter into far right and far left, creating an echo chamber that generates more hate and divides our society.
Legacy media would love nothing more than control what you and I hear and see and ultimately think. But we're now experiencing this paradigm shift where we decide what and who we listen to. We decide who we can trust based on the facts that are presented to us. And just to prove how much they want to control us, did you guys see what happened with CNN and Bruce Lavelle?
Just to be clear, this investigation began under Donald Trump.
Okay, and all during, the bottom line is the DOJ said there's nothing there.
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
They said they didn't have enough to indict. That shouldn't be the standard.
No, it's a charge, dear.
Okay,
dear.
Excuse me. Oh, well, thank you for the please. Okay,
hold on. I'm just going to stop it right here because we're not going to get off on a wrong foot. Please do not address a grown woman as dear in a condescending tone. Do not do that at my table. You can continue.
These are some of the same people who call Trump Hitler and his supporters as Nazis. But you call them dear and they freak out. Yeah, they stopped talking about what they were arguing about just to address this. Should we get angry if somebody older than us, maybe our grandpa or grandma, calls us darling? I really don't think he meant it as an insult. But this is how far the Democratic Party has gone. That we're supposed to watch every single word that we say so as not to offend anybody. This overly politically correct environment kills me, dude. And Abby Phillips reprimanded a grown man and said, "You can continue." That's nuts. That's just nuts. To demean a guy for a condescending tone and then suddenly give him permission to speak again, it's kind of hypocritical because it's like they're doing exactly what they feel is being done against them. This is the network that wants you to watch them over Joe Rogan. Nah, dog, I'm good on that. The crowd is speaking loud and clear. From the drunk-like stumbles on a sandy beach to utterly baffling remarks, Biden's latest attacks on logic have left everybody speechless. But this time, his antics backfires in the worst possible way. Calls for him and Harris to resign are echoing across America. It's no wonder why. When an intoxicated presidency meets critical moments, it's the American people who suffer. By the way, guys, if you appreciate the content, do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate the support, you guys. Joe, get it together, Joe. I mean, I really don't want to see Biden in the Oval Office anymore, but I also really don't want Harris to be president even for 2 months. You know what I mean? Maybe they can both resign and pass the torch to House Speaker Mike Johnson so that he can get everything ready for Trump's inauguration. I mean, seriously, January 20th cannot come fast enough. In the meantime, here's our current president fighting his latest enemy, sand. Watch.
Trying too hard. He's playing.
Mr. President!
Mr. President, just a word.
Mr. President, what are you going to say to Trump on Wednesday?
Whoa.
Mr. President, what are you going to talk with Trump on Wednesday? Mr. President, what are you going to talk with Trump on Wednesday?
Sure, they can call Trump weird. Well, Biden has been a weird person for years, though. And if you still need more convincing, here's Israeli journalist Neri Cross talking about how she asked President Joe Biden if he thinks that he could get a hostage deal done by the end of his term. He answered, "Do you think that you could get hit in the head by the camera behind you?" Here's a clip.
President Biden, do you think that you can get a hostage deal by the end of your term?
You think you can get hit in the head by a camera behind you? All right. Thank you all. Mr. President.
Oh, and by the way, guys, it wasn't shown in the video, but at the time, Biden was sitting across from the Israeli president. You know, the most powerful man and the most important ally in the Middle East. Seriously, you gotta wonder why his handlers still let him do these important things that have to do with our national security. I think that the American people made it very clear with Trump's landslide victory, guys. They consider Biden a disgrace, and they're considering this entire administration to be a disgrace. And boy, now that the election is over, guys, you could cut the tension in the Democratic Party with a knife. So here's the latest video of First Lady Jill Biden giving Vice President Kamala Harris the cold shoulder. Watch.
Distinguished guests, Major General Trevor J. Brandenkamp, Commanding General of Joint Task Force, National Capital Region.
White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre was also obviously caught off guard when Peter Doocy from Fox News asked her about the awkwardness between Kamala Harris and the president. But here, watch how defensive she got. Watch.
We know that today, a week after the election, President Biden and Vice President Harris had a private lunch. How awkward was that?
I don't even understand. Why would it be awkward?
Because
why would it
the president
be awkward?
got squeezed out for her, and then she kept him at arm's length, and then she lost, and now she's back.
Why would you characterize it as awkward? They have regular lunches. They meet and talk regularly. Why would you call it awkward?
So there's no weirdness about the way that things have unfolded since
Did you see them?
21st.
Did you see them together yesterday as well when they honored our veterans and were together during the day, making sure that we didn't forget the brave men and women that fought for this country? Did you see them together yesterday? Did you see the show of force together? This is. I'm not even going to take the premise of the question. What I will say is the president and the vice president had lunch today. They've had lunch many times. They have they communicate with each other regularly. They had an opportunity to discuss the last 70 days or so of this administration, how important it is to get things done for the American people. And that's their focus. That is genuinely their focus.
Talk about awkward, you guys. Karine Jean-Pierre was the epitome of awkwardness in answering that question, right? And so now I'm just kind of looking forward to not seeing her on TV anymore. Who knows? Maybe even Trump would make Tucker Carlson or even Joe Rogan his press secretary. What do you guys think about that? I mean, just look at how big of a role podcasting played in the 2024 election. And this is a fact. As Tucker Carlson pointed out, Joe Rogan changed the media landscape forever. Watch.
But I just want to say one word about Rogan. I've been in the media, as I said, my whole life. Rogan was like a sitcom actor and a stand-up comedian and like an MMA fighter. Okay, so he starts this thing called a podcast where he talks for like 3 hours. I'm in television at like a big network, and I'm looking over at this being like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. You know, no one's gonna listen to a 3-hour podcast from some MMA fighter. I know, right. And this guy's not even in our business. Like, what's he doing? He completely changed not just American media, but American history. He created a whole new, it would be like this one guy invented the newspaper or television. That's how big what Rogan did was. And I just will admit freely that I did not see it coming. I did not understand it. I didn't think it would work. And the fact that it did work says something so great and important about Americans, which is they really want to learn. They're not learning in school. They're not learning in the rest of the media. It's all shallow and dumb and about race and gender. It's all lying. And Rogan's just like willing to sit there with interesting people and talk for 3 hours. That was the most affirming, that is the most reassuring thing I've ever seen in 35 years in media, that worked.
Yeah, more on Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, and their fellow podcast giant Megyn Kelly later on in this video, guys. But first, let's talk about this very viral interaction, or rather non-interaction, between First Lady Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. Because let me tell you guys, the internet just exploded after this one. Now, I showed you guys the cold shoulder treatment that Kamala Harris got while sitting next to the First Lady, right? What I didn't show you was Kamala Harris and Second Gentleman Douglas Emhoff approached their row of seats. The Vice President greeted and shook hands with those around her, except Biden. Here, watch this. Wow, guys, just wow. And you would think that after she hid for so long, she'd actually have prepared something from the heart. But she still seems like a robot with people behind the scenes giving her lines. She also looks a little bit tired for somebody who's taken such a long break and was on vacation in a $7.1 million home, or resort, or whatever the place was. It's really up to your imagination if you think that she's been drinking this whole time. All of these factors showed the entire country that she wasn't authentic. And this may have been the reason why she kept making the rules for her possible interview with Joe Rogan. But her campaign advisor, Stephanie Cutter, she had a completely different explanation as to why it didn't happen.
We wanted to do it. I hate to repeat this over and over, but it was a very short race with a limited number of days. And for a candidate to leave the battleground to go to Houston, which is a day off the playing field in the battleground, getting that timing right is really important. We had discussions with Joe Rogan's team. They were great. They wanted us to come on. We wanted to come on. We tried to get a date to make it work, and ultimately we just weren't able to find a date. We did go to Houston, and she gave a great speech at an amazing event.
The Beyonce event?
I'm going to call it Reproductive Freedom. And we were hoping to be able to fit it in around that, and ultimately weren't able to do it. As it turns out, that was the day that Trump was taping his Joe Rogan, which they had never confirmed to us. We kind of figured that out in the lead up to it. She was ready, willing to go on Joe Rogan. Would it have changed anything? It would have broken through, not because of the conversation with Joe Rogan, but because the fact that she was doing it. And that was really the benefit of it. Will she do it sometime in the future? Maybe. Who knows? But it didn't ultimately impact the outcome one way or the other.
Now, you gotta love how smug these people can be, right? Trump's Rogan podcast generated more than 50 million views. To say that her coming on wouldn't have changed the thing is downplaying that fact. And to argue that timing was an issue is kind of offensive. Trump was doing multiple rallies and interviews per day. He was going nonstop this entire race. But according to these people, it wasn't their fault that it didn't work with Joe Rogan, which kind of sums up the far left demographic for the Democratic Party. If something goes wrong, it's not our fault. That's the idea. And I think that the leaders of the Harris-Walz campaign embodied this well into this podcast.
I would say, I mean, look, I am not media hater by any measure. And I think that, we women don't get far in life talking about double standards. So that's not the point. But I do think a narrative, 107 days, 2 weeks fucked up because of a hurricane, 2 weeks talking about how she didn't do interviews, which, she was doing plenty, but we were doing in our own way. We had to, be the nominee, had to find a running mate and do a rollout. I mean, there was all these things that you kind of want to factor in, but real people heard in some way that we were not going to have interviews, which was both not true and also so counter to any kind of standard that was put on Trump that I think that was a problem. And then on top of that, we would do an interview, and to Stephanie's point, the questions were small and processy and about
dumb.
They were not informing a voter who was trying to listen to learn more or to understand.
It's always everyone else that's the problem, not Kamala Harris gaslighting the American people or Tim Walz running and kicking on stage. It wasn't the lack of policy or how they would solve the issues that we have. It's us that's the problem. But she's still the VP though, right? Conservative commentator Steve Cortez, he described it. It's safe to say that Joe Biden hates Kamala Harris's guts. Popular X account and Wokeness pointed out that Jill refused to even even look at Kamala Harris. Journalist Andy Enjo shared a closer up shot of the second family and First Lady, describing Joe Biden as stone-faced and commenting that Harris supporters have actually been partly blaming President Biden for the candidate's loss in the election. I mean, the non-interaction even received international media attention as Italian TV journalist Leonardo Panetta wrote on X in Italian that Kamala Harris was ignored by Biden after her defeat. Right-wing commentator Benny Arthur Johnson, he also commented how they're not taking the loss very well. One X user commented, "Whoever seated them together hates them both." What about you guys? What do you think? I mean, before this, the First Lady did campaign for Kamala Harris, and she even spoke of how they bonded over the loss of close family members to cancer and other connections. I wonder what happened to that bond now, or was that fake and just for the cameras? Do you think Kamala Harris and the Democrats will ever get over this election loss, or is this the end of the Democratic Party as we know it? Drop a quick comment down below, guys. Let me know what you guys think on this real quick. And while you're at it, I highly recommend subscribing to the channel. Tap that notification bell too. That way you won't miss out on any of our updates like this one. Now, don't go anywhere, guys. I have loads to discuss with you guys. In fact, let's jump back into the discussion. So, well, Democrats are definitely trying to pick up the pieces after President-elect Donald Trump's landslide victory. But word on the street now is that some of Kamala Harris's backers are expressing frustration that Biden's decision to continue his re-election campaign until the summer, despite long-standing concerns about his age, inflation, border security, all but sealed the party's surrender of the White House. Not to mention, Biden was the source of a lot of mistakes that likely hurt Kamala Harris's chances of winning the election. But perhaps the Democrats' biggest mistake was ignoring the power of people like Joe Rogan, Megyn Kelly, and Tucker Carlson. They're already saying it on national TV right now. CNN commentator and former Democratic presidential candidate himself, Andrew Yang, he was particularly crucial of Harris's campaign decision to snub the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Big mistake. Instead, Trump hit Rogan's Austin, Texas studio in the final days of the campaign and racked up a massive audience. On YouTube alone, it was like 48 million views. I mean, seriously, guys, it was such a great opportunity. And, you know, Harris could have fielded easy questions about some of Joe Rogan's favorite topics, from the benefits of psychedelics to the existence of extraterrestrial life. But nah, she chose to make a surprise visit to Saturday Night Live for a 90-second cameo that pretty much just made people even madder and angrier, and may have ultimately cost the show and the network their broadcasting license. But seriously, Democrats, they just failed to see the significance of Joe Rogan. I mean, he and people like Kelly and Carlson, along with upstarts like gaming live streamer Aiden Ross, YouTube pranksters like the Nelk Boys, and comedian Theo Vaughn, they dominated the online discussion. Nobody was talking about the once mighty 60 Minutes, which Donald Trump skipped, by the way, and the big three cable news networks. And Trump, being the media genius that he is, he was extremely strategic about targeting young, disaffected men through these influencers. According to Sally Newub, associate professor of social policy and political science at Northwestern, these appearances helped him to connect with a generation of young men who have coalesced around certain conceptions of masculinity. For the poli-sci professor, Trump really speaks to those same themes. They were mobilized because they feel seen through his men's first lens. Sure enough, Joe Rogan's channel falls smack dab into that male sweet spot, guys. His reach skews overwhelmingly male at 80% according to Edison research. The majority of his listeners, 51%, fall in the 18 to 34 age range, and they cover the political spectrum. 35% identify as independent or something else. The rest are nearly split between Republican and Democrat. In short, it is exactly the demographic that Harris should have been targeting. I mean, just look at any social media platform, particularly X. Clips of Rogan's interviews, they always spread like wildfire. In fact, Rogan is well on his way to becoming a billionaire. In 2020, he signed an exclusive deal with Spotify worth $200 million over 3.5 years. In 2024, he re-upped with a 3-year, $250 million non-exclusive deal, and his podcast now runs on platforms like Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Sources familiar with the deal say Joe Rogan pays no commission to his WME agents, who only negotiate his stand-up appearances and Netflix specials. Then, of course, there's Tucker Carlson. The man was the most watched personality in cable news when Fox News pulled him from the airways back in April 2023. Now, apparently, it had to do with the network's $750 million settlement with Dominion Voting Systems, which sued the network for defamation over 2020 election claims. In fact, Fox and Carlson are still in litigation over Carlson's claim of the breach of his employment agreement. But now he's enjoying more fame and freedom with his Tucker Carlson network, which carries his signature podcast as well as MAGA-friendly content. Megyn Kelly was another heavy hitter that has helped Donald Trump get those views. And like Carlson, Kelly was shunned by the mainstream media after NBC fired her in 2018 following backlash over unpopular on-air comments. But look where she's at now. In 2021, she took the Megyn Kelly show to Sirius XM, signing an exclusive 2-year deal. Sources pegged the deal at about $20 million. In September 2023, she landed a new multi-year contract that saw her payday skyrocket. And of course, Kelly stomped for Trump at a Pittsburgh rally, saying that he will be a protector of women. Experts say that Kelly's appearance in Pittsburgh likely shored up some undecided female voters in the key state of Pennsylvania. Jake Paul, an influencer with more than 70 million total followers turned professional boxer, who, by the way, is also fighting Mike Tyson on November 15th in an event live streamed on Netflix, also marked a key Trump endorsement. In a YouTube video, Paul suggested Trump's 34 felony convictions made him kind of an outlaw challenger that he compared to America's founding fathers in their fight for independence from the British monarchy. And of course, let's not forget about Elon Musk, the world's richest person and perhaps also the most talked about personality on social media these days. Many people say that he may have actually made the biggest difference for Trump. For one, the Tesla and SpaceX CEO invested millions of dollars helping the candidate get elected. But even more than that, Elon Musk was not shy about relentlessly promoting the president-elect on X. And this is very unusual for any CEO of any major company. He almost single-handedly backed the pro-Trump America PAC to the tune of more than $175 million. That funded Get Out the Vote efforts, a $1 million per day sweepstakes program for voters, and digital advertising, including on outlets like the bro-friendly Barstool Sports. See, it's these internet celebrities that really matter to people now. It's not the likes of Howard Stern, Oprah, or some of these other liberal media news networks. People can relate to Joe Rogan, they can relate to Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly in a way that they could never relate to Taylor Swift. You get me? And like Trump, these podcasters, they also know what it's like to be persecuted for just voicing their honest thoughts and claiming your right to free speech. Much like we're doing right here, right now on this channel. So yeah, drop a quick yes in the comments down below, hit the like button to show your support for the work that we do here, guys. And while you're at it, if you want to join us over in our Patreon community, there's a link down below. You can get early access to content, commercial free, and also exclusive content that I just can't share here. Also, I want to thank you guys for buying us coffee. You guys are absolutely amazing. If you want to do so, there's also a link for that down below too. But anyway, guys, the great wealth transfer is in full effect. Our freedoms are being stolen, guys. Credit card companies are out to get us. And if you don't understand the game, well, you end up getting played by the game. Now, if you're anything like me, guys, you know, you were probably out of shape, maybe in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, and just feeling like the system is just completely taking advantage of you. I remember for a long time, I could rarely ever get any time to spend with my wife. And through trial and error and through a lot of pain, I figured out how to gain freedom and also lose a lot of weight and actually get in shape. And guys, I'm gonna be honest with you, that was a game changer. To no longer be living paycheck to paycheck, figuring out how to get the credit cards to pay me, the power of a strong credit score. I pay thousands of dollars less per year for the same house as my neighbor just because my credit is better than his is. And this is not to brag. I mean, but this is the truth. The banks are literally taking advantage of the poor. It's like the people who can least afford it, they're charging the poor what is like unofficially called a poor tax or a tax on the poor. I mean, I'm now at a point where, you know, like, number one, I don't pay for credit cards. In fact, credit card companies pay me to use their cards. And I figured out how to build a lifestyle that is just ultimately very, very healthy. I lost a tremendous amount of weight and I put on a lot of muscle. But when I was struggling, I wish I knew people who knew these things. So anyway, I decided to create a community of like-minded people who are also interested, just like me, in living better. So if you guys want to join my community, it's called the Liberty Pursuit Network. It is brand new. Come on over. I'd love to have you guys and join like-minded people. Be positively motivated by others who are also on the same pursuit. So I'm going to leave a link for you guys so you can join me over on the Life Pursuit Network in the description down below this video. So check it out, guys, and let's not be a victim of this great wealth transfer that is taking place right now. Sometimes people's subs get removed. I don't know if we're getting censored. I don't really know what's going on with that, but just make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. But yeah, let's stick together to January 20th and beyond, guys. By the way, I just uploaded a fresh video talking about how Donald Trump already is making moves at the border and the cartels are running scared. Definitely check that video out after this one. As always, thanks for hitting the like button and subscribing. See you guys next time.